how is the public being served by keeping that young guy locked up until he's in his 70s? And, you know, you can add the cost to it, but it doesn't serve a public good.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Taylor, Weldon's story is one extreme example of mandatory sentencing. But how often do we see stories like this? And what are some of the collateral consequences of laws like these?
I don't think it's extreme, not from my research, not what I've seen in this nation. I think there are many situations very similar, and in some cases even worse. The collateral is devastating, both personally and the small picture for families and communities. Then a larger picture probably too, because a young man that should be able to be reformed and put to not necessarily music work, some type of work, and also that he's not there with his family and his sons. So we know from research that a lot of times those children will end up in this particular same type of situation if we're not careful, because their parents are not there, their family's not there. So the fallout, the collateral is, to me, it's unbelievable. It's one of the big problems with the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, where do we stand on our fight to end federal mandatory sentencing? What laws have been passed and what laws have been introduced that can deliver the reform that is needed?
Well, the closest that we got to doing anything of consequence was back in 2010. It's called the Fair Sentencing Act. And you can tell me whether or not you think this is fair or not, but it reduced the penalty for crack cocaine versus powder cocaine, the disparity, down to, I believe it was 18 to 1, from 100 to 1. So you still get punished 18 times as much. As somebody in recovery, that it's just silly. You know, that's like saying, DeRoche, if you drink vodka, you know, you're going to get a year in prison, but if you drink whiskey, it's going to be 18 years in prison, buddy. That'll teach you. We don't want whiskey on the streets, but vodka's okay, apparently. And that was the last thing that we did at the federal level, but what we did was we a number of the sentences, we had what's called the safety valve. And that was the first time the legislature agreed that the judges needed a little more discretion back. And when people came in from the prosecution, their job is to present the best case possible and get the verdict, you know, the guilty verdict. The problem was that the legislature tied them up so much that the judge had no discretion. So they gave them about this much discretion, just an itty little bit. But it has diverted some people from mandatory minimums. But what it did in the sentencing is it did not go retroactively. So what it said was this population of people that we're going to treat differently, but those still serving time, including today, 5 years later, will continue to serve their time even though we've passed a law saying it's unjust to do that. And we've been unsuccessful, advocacy organizations, in trying to persuade Congress to see the wisdom in their own actions by making that apply to people that are already in prison. We also have these very wild, but very important coalitions that are forming in Washington, D.C. and around the country, where you see bills introduced called the Smarter Sentencing Act by Senator Rand Paul and Senator Dick Durbin and Senator Mike Lee and Senator Patrick Leahy. And for those of you who follow politics know that I've just said right wing, you know, left wing, you know, communist, Tea Party. You know, I'm teasing my friends of both parties, but they both agree on these things in principle. But we're really left with more interest in the Congress about the back end, about what we do with people when we get out of prison. So Generation Opportunity, those in the campuses are really going to have to mobilize and educate themselves to make the upfront sentencing a bigger part of the national debate.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Joe, how do laws like mandatory minimum sentencing affect the cost of our prison system? And how does the prison system affect our federal and state budget? What does that mean for taxpayers?
Well, they say if you don't like a question, answer the one you want to. I want to answer Dr. Taylor's first. Sure. Collateral consequences. The two boys you saw up there that are sons have a 7 times greater chance of going to prison themselves because they have a parent in prison. So we create a life cycle. You're hard to get out. It's hard to get out. A few months back, Mitch Bean, who was the former director of the House Fiscal Agency in Lansing, came out and with some statistics. We use the number $35,000 a year per prisoner in the state. Mitch said that it's really more like 75 when you look at the total social cost of families, what it does to a family in a neighborhood, and what it does for those kids. Because in a lot of respects, you're instantly forever throwing them into poverty. So it's our social service network that has to then go back in and take care of those kids when they have a much worse chance of succeeding. They maybe didn't have a great chance in the first place, but they had a better chance with a parent in the household and one that was not in prison. So looking for alternatives to incarceration, certainly anything this lengthy, which basically takes that father out of the home forever, is a necessary change that we have to look at. Michigan did a really good job in the past few years of adding what's called specialty courts. We have now courts for veterans, we have courts for mentally ill, drug courts, sobriety courts. So we already recognize with those populations that there's a cause for crime. It's not just the crime we're treating, it's the cause of it. And if we can do that with other groups like vets and mentally ill, why can't we look at that across the board and say, let's try to treat the root cause of the crime. What got that person to do that? I'm not saying that they don't need discipline, that they don't need punishment, but let's deal with the source of it instead of just the lock them up mentality after the crime has taken place. And then I think we will start to see crime reduce. And we're already getting there. We're making some headway, but we'll just be able to expand that. I think you're going to see crime decrease if we treat it more the root cause of it instead of just reacting to it after it happens.
Sure, absolutely. And along those lines, Dr. Taylor, can you talk a little bit about your work with young people in the youth distressed communities and how they are affected by the current criminal justice system?
Well, the parts that I look at in Michigan, I would have to caution. There's an undercurrent always that it's urban, or that it's folks of color. But in this state, we're looking at poverty in rural communities. We're looking at a lot post-industrial Michigan, out of work, that were dependent on the auto industry. So we're talking about a lot of young people that get into trouble for drinking marijuana and doing things that kids do. And I'm not saying it's kids play. We have a lot of violence, all of that. So my work is, I have fellow researchers in the room that work with me. Our work is overwhelming with that because media reports what they like to, which is a Kodak moment, but there's people living with no water in abandoned places and have been there, not for 2 years until they get back on their feet. They've been there 5 years, 10 years, even 20 years. So this is killing us, and people don't want me to talk about this. Public education, we talk about how many kids that are going to this school and that school. We have a record number of kids not in school at all. We have a record number of kids who've never been in anyone's school. So I think that is a recipe for disaster. They're devastated, and they're not criminal. In many of these communities, they cannot be rehabilitated because they have not been rehabilitated. And again, people have a lot of theories and a lot of political ideologies. I'm apolitical, let me say that. I'm neither Republican nor Democrat or anything else. What I'm looking at is something very, very scary. And that if we don't do something immediately, when we talk about the budget, we now look at a budget that corrections is the #1 item in the budget, whereas not that long ago, it was either education or the Department of Social Services. Corrections is the #1 budget item, and it's not getting better in there. So we have to find immediately some alternatives, and we're not finding that. So I think, I'm hoping that this discussion, that's why I came, I made a point to come, but I'm hoping that some action takes place opposed to rhetoric. I'm overwhelmed by rhetoric. Not personal issues.
Sure. Sure. Well, following up on the action part of that, Dr. Taylor, Craig, the Justice Fellowship advocates for a justice system that results in restorative justice for victims, those convicted of crimes, and for their communities. How has the Justice Fellowship been working to reform the laws that impacted Weldon and others like it?
Just to pick up on what Dr. Taylor said right there, you can't give away something you don't have. I don't care what aspect of your life you have. If you don't have it, you can't give it away. And what is wrong with our criminal justice system structurally is just as Dr. Taylor is talking about people in what's falling away in Michigan, and it isn't just in the urban areas, and it isn't just in minorities of color, but it seems to be, as he points out, spreading. I would advocate that it's a decay in some of the things that has made Michigan great, not just like multiple times, whether it was the fur trade, whether it was the lumber trade, whether it was the industrial, the automobile economy, which was the values and the morals and the ethics and the care for the value of human dignity of each other. And what you have when you have a criminal justice system that looks past people and a government that looks past people at such a level and for so long, where it becomes okay to forget about somebody. As he said, the Kodak moment, I don't watch a lot of news, but for people in Southeast Michigan, everybody gave this guy that had to walk 20 miles a day to work. I think he's up to $1 million or something like that. He walked for 20 days, or 20 years right in front of everybody over snowdrifts, as if he's the only one in 8 million people that's doing that, right? And we look at the people that we incarcerate at such a high level in Michigan, even though it's improved under Governor Snyder, Chairman Joe Adam's leadership and others, and I'll give credit to the predecessor, Governor Granholm, for putting some of that into motion, that we're doing good. But if you look at the lives of the people that are in there, the cycle of who it's affected is broken because we're not putting the relationship between the person that does the harm and the person that's harmed by the crime in the community. That's a circle between those three people. We put the government in there and we disrupt that balance, and it's between the person causing harm or fixing to cause the harm, as Weldon was doing, and the government, who's going to say, we're going to pretend like we were harmed and we're going to punish you and we're going to extract all the money out of you and your family and we're going to keep you here for a very long period of time. And we're going to go and we're going to draw down money away from education and roads and infrastructure and everything else, right? Because that's the money that we need to keep all of these people, whoever these people are. But it certainly isn't the victims calling for it. And it certainly isn't the communities calling for it anymore. It's become a structural imbalance. So when we say restorative justice, I want you here, those of you that come to this generation opportunity to know, simply put, it's the balance between the person that does the harm, the person that's been harmed, in the community. Equity. There's been a tear between those three parties, rebalancing that out. The government is a mediator, not a party to that transaction. And in Michigan and in our country, it's exactly the opposite. The government sucks up all of that. And the people that, like I said, have either caused harm or are fixing to cause the harm, are the government goes and prosecutes those people and determines how badly they feel as the government, not how badly a victim would feel. And that's the structural imbalance that restorative justice tries to fix.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, please.
Craig is a lot more articulate than I am, but he just nailed it there. And if we get to a restorative justice system, we're going to have real healing. This whole victims' rights thing has been just stolen by the government. We really need to have victims and the people that offended them find a way to heal, and then communities can heal. But Craig is right. The government, through its victims' rights advocates and all their departments, have taken that away from victims. They've taken that right away from victims. We have all these rights, but we don't give victims the right to forgive, and we don't restore relationships. And when we don't do that, we continue to divide a community against itself. So thanks, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you just follow up on that for me? Some reforms have already taken place and been signed by Governor Snyder here last year that you were a leading part of. Can you talk about the legislation that you sponsored and were involved in, and what's still left to do?
Well, there's a whole lot left to do, and I get credit for a lot of stuff because I kind of led the charge, but we didn't get much done. In my middle term, I ran what's called the juvenile expungement bill, and I had staffers and other people tell me, Joe, this is going to be a tough road. You're going to have a hard time getting this thing through. It passed, I believe, unanimously out of the House, and then I believe it passed unanimously out of the Senate. So the time is right. We did a juvenile expungement bill, and then in lame duck this term, we passed an adult expungement bill to allow people to say, hey, you know what, I've cleaned my stuff up. I've gotten rid of that baggage in my life. That isn't me anymore, and I would like to go back to the judge and get this off my record. And now you're able to do that with another offense on your record for both juveniles and adults. The Sentencing Commission was the thing that I said I'm not leaving the legislature until it's done. Fortunately, I got that one done. Our sentencing structure is so broken where me as a legislator, I get a phone call from a constituent. They say, hey, I had this happen in my life. Somebody created this great offense against me, and I want you to do something about it. And being a good state rep and trying to look good to my constituents, I go out and I write a law, or I ask somebody else to write a law. And we put some strict sentencing on the bill. And we run a bill, look like a hero to my constituents. Well, you multiply that times 110 reps and 38 senators, all trying to look good over years of time. And here's the worst part. I don't even pick the sentencing. I don't even discuss it. We send a bill off to the Legislative Service Bureau, and a bunch of attorneys write the language, and they just pick a number based on what was done in the past and something that's close and relevant. And they pick the sentencing, and Lord knows, it's up until the past couple of years, it's not popular to vote against a sentencing bill. Well, that's what we tried to change. We tried to change that conversation. And the Sentencing Commission, when the governor appoints those members, have got to look at a comprehensive overview of the sentencing and say, our piecemealing it together hasn't worked. Let's look at what's fair and what's equitable and what restores justice for people. Let's not just say more is better. And that's what I wanted the Sentencing Commission reestablished for, with experts there. So guys like me don't just do it out of passion or out of just being mad at somebody. And that's the problem we've had for so many years. So I'm hoping that takes place, and I hope that the legislature, when it gets reports back, has the guts to say, okay, enough is enough. Well, I was very proud, and this is something that happened internally that nobody knew about. But we actually had a little bit of a moratorium on new felonies last year. And it wasn't something that was ever published. It was something that the speaker agreed to, because I just complained enough. Every time I saw a bill come forward and say, what in the heck is this? We're making a new felony out of something? Why isn't it a misdemeanor? Why is it a 10-year sentence? And we shelved them. We put them aside. And some passed later on after we had to get into the human trafficking thing, and some didn't pass at all. But at least we had other people talking about it. And I knew my job was complete when one of these bills would go up, and I'd see a half a dozen red votes up there of my colleagues saying no. It wasn't just Joe saying no anymore. People were actually starting to recognize that, okay, we need to do things different. So I hope that continues now that I'm gone, but I can't say I've got a dozen PAs that have changed directions. I think I changed the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Taylor, mandatory sentencing is just one element of a vastly broken criminal justice system. Can you talk about the growing tensions that you're seeing between citizens and law enforcement in the communities that you've studied? And can you point to other ways we see brokenness within the system?
Good question. tough question. That's complex to me. I think we need to understand it's not a level playing field. That some communities are in severe shape, other communities, have. For example, I'm seeing more middle class kids across the board get into trouble that I didn't see 20 years ago. People forget that when we look at Detroit, Detroit was a thriving community. And so suddenly now we have this behavior and words that are labeling. And we do need good law enforcement. We really do. We need good access to attorneys. So it's a very complex situation that you're talking about. You're talking about, I'm really happy to hear Joe talk about expungement, because the failure of no education, and I'm simplistic, no education, no skill sets. The only thing that welcomes you is the street. And when the street takes you on, it has no moral base anymore. Because there was a time there was honor among thieves. There were certain things that we didn't do in street culture. Now there's nothing that we won't do. And so what happens is that we have a lot of people who are being held captive in their homes that are senior citizens, that they can't come out, and you can't start a business because crime is so high, but there's nothing else there. So when you start talking about alternatives, I mean, it appears to me that a lot of the communities that I've been looking at for some time, some we were talking earlier, Mother Nature's taking back over. It's just like, I think the average citizen in America has no idea what's going on in many of these communities. Poverty is really ripping it apart. So some people are living and other people are surviving. And I would contend that there's a significant difference between living and surviving. And so they're not kids, they turn into a little predator. And I cringe at the word, but the fact that's how they're treated. So we're in dire need of rescue now. Again, I'm just sorry to keep repeating myself, but I'm looking at conditions that just shouldn't be taking place. There's no schools. There are communities where there are no churches. Families need to be repaired. A lot of the families are very dysfunctional, and many of the places I'm looking at, many of the places that I'm looking at, is normalized. That's my greatest fear, that you normalize ignorance, you normalize violence. You think it's okay to beat your children, or it's okay to beat your wife or your girlfriend. Those are the norms that you're looking at. That's what we're countering. And we need a lot more help, but the state is in trouble because where does the money come from? And Craig was saying something to me before this came up. I agree with him. I wish some filthy rich person would step up and say, listen, how can we put money not into people's pockets, but teach them to fish? I mean, give them some hope. There's a lot of hopelessness. And that's the thing that's changed the most in my last 10 years.
Sure. And right along the lines of that hopelessness, Craig, we're seeing that lack of second chances for those who exit the criminal justice system. And what has the legislature, Congress done, and what can they still do to help people become productive members of society?
I'm going to date myself here a little bit. I hope some of the audience members have watched the show The Simpsons. But the great philosopher Homer Simpson, I think, said this best. When his son Bart Simpson said, Dad, why do you give Flanders, the nerdy do-gooder neighbor, why are you always giving Flanders such a hard time and insulting him? He says, because, boy, it makes me feel better about myself. And I think that a lot of our policies really don't go much deeper than that when it comes to somebody that's been incarcerated, somebody that's been convicted of a crime. You become those people. You become a separate class of folks from the others. And all of those other natural things of human nature, whether it's political. Do you want those people competing for your job? Do you want those kind of people moving into your neighborhood? Do you want those kind of people dating your daughter? You guys know what I'm talking about, those kind of people. And we've reconciled some things in this country about race, and about religion, you know, about sexuality, about a number of different things that have not gotten perfect, but they've gotten better in the decades to come. But it seems that with all the fierceness that people have in human nature, they will apply it to those that have been convicted of crimes, particularly those that have been incarcerated. And there hasn't been a lot done. In America, there has not been a lot done in the States. We are literally scratching the surface. There are 65 million American adults with a criminal record, myself included, and it affects everything. And there is absolutely no logic to how you get collateral consequences and barriers to entry, to getting a job, to getting life insurance, to, I fly 150 times a year, right? My crimes were alcohol addiction related crimes, drunk driving, things like that. And I cannot get my pre-clearance. I got a letter from the TSA saying because of my criminal conviction, even though every single terrorist in the history of terrorism hasn't drank alcohol, you know, and so there's absolutely no logic applied to it. It's because you're one of those people, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that, and we find that people even 20, 30 years later, I know somebody at the state level that had worked his way up 5 years after leaving prison to he got hired at the state in 1973, worked his way up all the way to a pretty high position, applied for a second position. Now this is in 2013, 40 years after he started working for the state of Michigan, and was called for the interview and said, oh, we got to cancel the interview because you've been convicted of a felony in 1968, 5 years before you started working here 40 years ago. That's how we treat people. And so what we are seeing happen around America is, and I think this is good, some states, Virginia last week, Minnesota, can't keep track of all of them, but they're starting to pop, are saying they're going to change their hiring practices. I don't know if Michigan's there yet, but saying we will not discriminate against people based on their criminal record. We'll take it into account after we interview you, but we're not going to throw away your application and say that you're not qualified for the job. And we're seeing private employers like Target, Walmart, Meijer, you know, other larger retailers and others start to take initiative. But to be honest with you, we're literally scratching the surface. There are millions of Americans that feel as though they have to give up hope, they have to stay on public assistance because they've been disinvited from the American economy because of things that they did decades ago.
Sure, absolutely. Joe, bipartisan energy and agreement is happening in Lansing right now around criminal justice reform. Do you think now is the time that we're going to see significant changes occurring, and what groups are you seeing coming together?
Well, I said a long time ago, and with Craig's help and others, you know, this has got to be led from the Republican side, because it's kind of the Nixon goes to China idea that if it is strictly led by the Democratic side, it's, you know, we're going to be back into the partisanship. So you're seeing right-on crime groups and prison push and a lot of groups like that. Craig referred to Rand Paul. You look at the Bushes, Rick Perry, John Kasich, other Republicans around this country that are saying it's our time. We need to take this issue. We need to own this issue. Now, when I was there, I mean, everybody knows I tried to reach across the aisle, and the Democrats will come. So it can be bipartisan, but I think it has to be led from the right. And you know, the challenges we have are the same challenges this year as the House Republicans have said we're going to take this issue on and we're going to work on it. And in some respects, the best thing that happened to this issue was me leaving the legislature, because now people can't just look to me to fix it.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
That's a nice retro.
I'm just glad it wasn't me.
So now I got to regain my.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. We're going to have the same challenges. So the legislature is going to have the same challenges it did. It's bipartisan, but right now it's not bicameral. And we've got some old guard in the Senate, that do not want to see this thing move forward. And it's more about politics than it is about policy. What I've been trying to tell people is that it is not just good policy. We know that. We know that we can't keep going along at $2 billion a year, locking up 40-some thousand people and taking their lives away from them. It hasn't worked. But we need to, this is also good politics. I come from the second most conservative district in the state. I live in the second most conservative county in the country. I led this, or I tried to lead this, and I have not had a single constituent in my district come and say, we're going to run against you because of it. You're on the wrong side of that issue. You know, you're way off and you failed on our party. Now, there are people that think I'm a rhino from my district, but it's not for this issue. They agree with me on this issue. The Tea Party people who can't stand me for a couple of my policies actually say I'm on the right side on this. So it's an interesting paradigm where you have both the far left and the far right coming together. When I told a story when I left the legislature, we all say our final comments. When I started back in 2009, all the lobbyists come through your office and you get to know them. And I had a meeting with the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and the Triangle Foundation. Now, if you're in Ottawa County, little Christian Reformed white guy from Ottawa County, you know, I said, I thought I walked into the gates of hell. That's not a group I ever expected to work with. But I built a relationship with the ACLU, and Shelley Weisberg is I consider her a friend. I mean, we are on the same page on so many of these issues. So it's a weird dynamic that's happening between conservatives and the traditional liberals that we're coming together on this.
Did you say the Triangle Foundation?
Yes.
Do they know what the Triangle Foundation is?
I don't even know if they're around. I haven't seen. That's the LGBT community, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Taylor, moving on from that, what do you think what does an ideal criminal justice system look like? What's possible for the future, and how can our generation get involved to affect change in the criminal justice system?
Wow. That's really tough. Ideal?
Yeah, what's an ideal criminal justice system look like to you for young people and for all that are affected by the criminal justice system?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, since its inception in this society that we had the framework that gave our citizens full rights, ideally we would be, innocent until proven guilty in those types of situations. But we never, forefathers didn't think about 14-year-olds getting in trouble for serious crimes. How do we handle that? I'm listening very closely, and I have a horrible habit of saying something bad about it, but I make faces. Some things I'm kind of not on the same page, because that's not what I feel and I see in many communities opposition. I see a very strong lock them up. This president has been vilified, and he can't do anything right. So the racial polarization, the class, and that's why I was asking about the Triangle Foundation, that I think it all connects. So in order to have an ideal situation, we would have to have an ideal agreement that we were going to start over from scratch, and that we would try to do things the way some things we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But that has not been the case. We have a lot of people in prison that should not be there, that they don't have access to good legal representation. In this state I'm talking about, that I know about firsthand. I think, Joe, when I was with you, I have a pretty good memory. I was saying that they have archaic policies and I respected people from DLC, so I'm not knocking, but a policy that a lot of young men, for example, could not go into barbering because there was something idiotic about they couldn't get a hold of scissors or something like that, which I'm not a very good political guy. I'm like, duh, what's that? You know, that they've got to do something when they re-enter. And I'm a little bit shaken by the fact that in this state, we have a hard time getting young people jobs with no criminal records and that have college degrees. And so you're talking about giving someone a job, and the policies are deeper than that to me, that Target and everybody can say, okay, we'll wipe away, you don't have a record, but that's gonna come back up. And how do you really deal with that? And that some people record has to be remembered because of the things that they've done. And how to, some people, when they re-enter, they're going back to the same conditions, the same mindset. So those are the things that kind of just makes it impossible for me at this moment to talk about a perfect situation. I've grown tired of it. That's why I said earlier about the rhetoric. That's not to knock or to say that the good things that are taking place, but we need a lot more. I mean, I see a new Detroit. Boy, people are gonna get pissed when I say this, but I see downtown Detroit, and I think that they've done some tremendous things, great things. But from the boulevard to the river, I think, crime is down 34%. With one of my colleagues there is the police chief, Anthony Holt, at Wayne State University. You could probably get drunk and stumble all around and nothing's gonna happen to you. But once you cross into the neighborhoods, they're like Soweto, they're the bad ones. And you better not go there, you better not come back. We're not addressing that. And that has to be addressed because your criminals, those who break the law, are not gonna come from downtown. So that's New Emerald City. It's great to be down there, and I wanna be down there, and I can afford to be down there. But I'm concerned about the kids who are in nobody's school. So what are they gonna become? What are they gonna become? They don't have, I just think we take a lot of things for granted. So I'm sorry, that probably wasn't good. I did look at it, but I was in class and they sent me a question. That was probably a question you guys skipped with me.
No, I think you did a great job. Thank you very much. Craig, what do you think? What's an ideal criminal justice system look like, and how would you encourage young people sitting here in the audience or watching our Google Hangout online? What would you tell them how to get involved and really affect change if they're outraged by what they're seeing in the criminal justice system?
Well, I hope they are outraged, and I hope they want to come forward and make a change. But I do want to temper some things here too, because we are talking about something epic. To me, we're talking about the fall of man. We're talking about human nature, the human condition. We're talking about the very first story after leaving the garden was what? A murder in the family, right? And I'm just not is going to be able to fix the fall of man, or that any particular village or family or effort of one person or group will. But we certainly can make a difference. And I think that it starts with understanding some of the wisdom of what made our country different and better a couple hundred years ago. Take a look at the importance. Dr. Taylor talked about indigent defense, proper defense. For my conservatives in the room that think that sounds like growing the government, think that sounds like giving something that's unfair to somebody, think of your Second Amendment rights. Why do you get guns? Because the government has guns. That was the philosophy and the wisdom of our forefathers. Why on earth wouldn't you get attorneys if the government has attorneys? It was their same philosophy. Our second president defended British soldiers that shot unarmed people because nobody else in Boston would give them a proper, full, equitable defense. We believe in these principles, checks and balances with our prosecutors, with the police. The outcomes should be based on what the service is that you expect of these people's jobs, not based on conviction rates. We have perverse incentives, whether it's seizure of assets, whether it's the number of people that you arrest, or if it's a prosecutor, the number of people that you convict. Those are moral hazards. We do not allow you to have moral hazards when you buy homeowners insurance. We don't allow you to insure your house for more than it's worth because we're afraid that morality might get to you and people would burn down their house because they profit from it. Why do we allow police departments and prosecutors and everybody else to fund their budgets based on the number of people that they arrest and convict? I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just saying, why did we lose our conviction as Americans and put that structurally into the system? Why did we get rid of the checks and the balances with the amount of defense that we thought was valuable and equitable, even though our Constitution Bill of Rights is riddled with that? These are important things. When it comes to the incarceration, the original way of incarceration was rehabilitation or detainment, awaiting trial and to do the other things. Constructive culture, I think everybody in America wants prison to be something that lessens the chance the person will commit a crime again. Every study shows that is not the case. That's a structural change that we need to make. So I just think that a better system would be judged by, again, those three parties. The person that causes the harm, are they moved away from the situation? Did they take responsibility for what they did, accountability, and pay it back? Was the person that was harmed by that made good to the extent that they were? Does the community consider that a proportionate square deal? The government is a facilitator. They should not be immorally incentivized to play a bigger role than that, and they should be held accountable for the outcomes. Are they driving those three parties toward where they want to go or away from where they want to go, and instead of arrest and conviction rates? And I think that you would see a massive cultural change in America in the behavior of those prosecutors, judges, police, people that are being prosecuted, people that are in prison overnight.
Thank you very much. Joe, I'm going to give you the last word here. What do you think is your ideal criminal justice system, and how would you encourage young people in Michigan and across the country to get involved in the criminal justice reform movement?
Well, yeah, Craig touched on indigent defense. That was one of the successes we had when I was in the legislature. And Craig, you referred to it as, it's kind of a progressive movement, a left of center kind of thing. In reality, that was started when I was a freshman by none other than Congressman Justin Amash, as far right as you can get. He didn't get it done. And then it was finished in my second term by Tom McMillan, another far right winger. Believed in indigent defense because, as Craig said, the Second Amendment says equal justice. And whether you have means or don't have means or live in poverty, justice is the one thing that should be equal. And what does a good system look like? Equal justice. And I keep turning around because this poster refers to something about it doesn't solve any problem. That's my biggest frustration. I was approached here. And I used to say, if I believed that locking people up actually fixed crime, I'd probably write the blank check. But it's not working. We've been at this experiment for 30 years, and instead of fixing our crime problem, we've just split families apart and communities apart because we don't rehabilitate the people that go in. I mean, many of them will age out. I mean, they go in as people your age with a lot of testosterone and a lot of problems. And eventually they come out as old guys like me, and they're just old guys. Okay? We get over it. We grow up. I was one your age, and I raised one like your age. I know what young men are like. I had all those same problems. And I like to say that, I graduated from college in '83. I was in place today. We're in place back then. I probably wouldn't be up here talking to you. I did some stupid things. And fortunately, when I got caught, the laws weren't what they are. So I'm looking for a system that takes into account a little bit of mercy, a little bit of understanding, that people have things in their lives that they're going to get through. And we need to treat people with a little more compassion, even if they've done something against us. I truly believe that. And if I can go on, I'm going to tell you a story because I love this story.
Please.
All right. Last summer I was in Detroit, and I was in downtown in the Emerald City there, and I got a cool tour of some really cool places. One of those places was the federal court building. And the judge that participated in the grand bargain, he gave a number of us a tour of his chambers and his courtroom. The building, the federal court building, was built in the 1880s. Beautiful building. It was torn down in the 1930s. A new building was built. The judge at that time of that courtroom said, I want an exact duplicate of that courtroom put into the 1930s building. And it is a gorgeous building. It cost them $1 million for that room back in 1930s dollars. So it's ornate. It makes the Capitol look weak. It's woodwork and stone and tile and art. And it's just a beautiful room. If the judge is sitting up here, in the back of the room is the door, and one of those pieces of art painted in is a box up over the doorway. And the judge made a point to talk to us about this. It's a box, and in that box, stuck down, is a sword. He says, do you know what that is? No, it's a sword in a box. He says, that's an unction box. And I'd never heard that term before. If you look up unction, you'll find it in connection with the Catholic Church, or you'll find it in connection with medicine. You won't find it in connection with, in a law book. But he said, unction is a staff. It's a healing agent. And when I hand out a sentence, I have to look at that picture, and I have to remember that my punishment that I give must be given with a degree of mercy. I thought, what a cool picture. And that's such a biblical concept. You showed no man what is good, what does the Lord require of you? But to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And I just think somebody in the 1880s, when they built that first building, somebody had the forethought to think of that, of an unction box. And mercy goes with justice. So that's my picture of what a judicial system should look like.
Thank you for that story. I really appreciate that. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for being here tonight. Dr. Taylor, Dr. Roche, and Joe Hopman. We really appreciate your contributions to this discussion. And thank you to everybody online that tuned in through our Google Hangout. And everybody in the audience, thanks for coming out. And the criminal justice system, what we've heard here tonight and seen, is incredibly broken. And figuring out where to start seems nearly impossible. And the failures of our criminal justice system affect the lives of every single American. So the breadth and seriousness of this urgent issue are not lost on us here at the Generation Opportunity Institute. But the harder we've worked on this, the more encouraged we've become by the broad spectrum of support that is real reform in 2015. It brings together Republicans and Democrats. It brings together people of all beliefs and backgrounds. And most importantly, it brought together you and I this evening. Because the truth is, real reform doesn't start in the halls of Congress or in Lansing. It starts with you and me in this room. That's why we're committed to providing you with the resources you need to understand this issue and then go home and tell your family and your friends. I hope that you will tell them that it's unacceptable that America has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world. Tell them that incarceration causes poverty. It's unacceptable that communities of color are disproportionately affected. Tell them that this is not only an issue of civil liberties, it's an issue ensuring every American has the chance to succeed. I hope you enjoyed the film and the discussion this evening. I hope you'll stay in touch and remember that real reform starts now with you. Thank you very much.